This story was inspired by Loki's imaginary dagger quote from the Disney Plus original Loki. I hope you all enjoy it. Love is a dagger. Murdoch never had time for love. His hobby kept him quite busy, and his job certainly didn't help that case either. Being a paid murderer wasn't easy. The constant thrill of the hunt if his victims ran, the adrenaline rushing through his veins as he slowly tortured and killed them, and the long and arduous process of hiding his presence and evidence from the police. It kept him on his toes and occupied a good portion of his brain. It never got easier, but that's what made it so fun. So who was he to complain? Today was another day and another murder. Murdoch was hired by an anonymous man to take out a woman. He was given a brief description as well as some pictures of the man and woman together. She was beautiful, he couldn't deny that, but a job was a job and he had to see it through. As he roamed the streets of her residential city, he noticed her across the street. The murderer frowned in frustration. He couldn't simply shoot her from his position. The streets were rather crowded that day, which meant at least one person would see him take out his target. He needed to get closer. As Murdoch quickly crossed the street, he watched as she entered a French-style cafe. He rolled his eyes at her choice of dining. That specific cafe was known both for their amazing food and for their incredibly fake accents. She could have done so much better, but that wasn't for him to decide. Maybe this was his chance. He quickly entered the cafe, which to his dismay was rather packed. Looking around, he saw plenty of people, but not enough seats, and surely no sign of his target. "Bonjour! How may we help you today?" came an awfully fake French accent, and Murdoch looked to see a scrawny waiter in a suit vest and pants, with dyed blue hair. I'll take black coffee, please." He said this out of slight panic, but played it cool on the outside. "Ah, splendid! Would you like cream, sugar? Are you dining in or ordering to go?" "No, thanks. I'd like to dine in, though I don't see any available seats." "You can sit with me, don't worry," a feminine voice interrupted, and both turned to see his target waving at them from her spot in a booth with a beautiful smile. Murdoch was shocked. She was even more beautiful in person. The pictures he had been given just didn't do her justice. Yes, YNLN, his next victim, had taken his breath away with only a single sight. "Ah, magnifique! I'll get your order ready right away, sir." Murdoch nodded at the man and sat down across from YN. "What's your name, sir?" she asked, making him tense up slightly. He wasn't used to his targets being so friendly right away. "My name's Murderiplier. What's yours?" She smiled again, making his cheeks heat up just a little. "My name's YNLN. It's nice to meet you." He already knew her name, but this interaction with her didn't bother him at all. How many times had he charmed his female victims through conversation, only to slaughter them and laugh at their rotting corpses? Too many to count. Murdoch's drink arrived soon after, and the pair in the booth began to talk. He found himself engaged solely in the conversation, and his thoughts avoided the gruesome topic of his mission. After his cup was empty, Wyan excused herself to go to the bathroom, and his thoughts returned. "I could put some drugs in her drink," he thought, staring at it from his side of the table. He contemplated it for a minute, but couldn't bring himself to pull through. She returned to the table, and they returned to their previous conversation, their murderous task once again forgotten. When the bills arrived later at the table, Murdoch paid both of them off, much to Wyan's surprise. "Why did you pay for mine?" He smiled at her, internally chuckling as her face donned a slight pink hue. "I owe you for letting me sit with you. It's the least I can do to repay your kindness." She looked down with a shy, "Thank you." They left the cafe together, about to part ways, when she suddenly turned around. "Hey, Murdoch?" He looked at her beautiful being again, with a slight head tilt, waiting for her to continue. "Would you maybe want to do this again sometime?" He was shocked and surprised to say the least, but smiled and nodded. "I would like that very much. Would it be all right then if I got your number?" The slight pink on Wyan's cheeks turned into a darker shade, and she nodded happily. The two exchanged contacts and left in different directions, his target still very much alive. It's a weapon to be wielded far away or up close. Their next meeting turned into another, and that third outing turned into many more. Much to his confusion, Murdoch began to feel odd around his stalled target. There were butterflies in his stomach when he thought about her. His face became unnaturally warm when he looked into her eye-color eyes, or receiving a text asking to meet up. And every waking moment was about his lovely Wyan in his arms without a worry in the world. He had to kill her. That was his mission, and he had to see it through. But much to his confusion, he didn't want to kill her. How did this happen? The cold-hearted killer Murderiplier didn't want to end this insignificant life of his victim? No, he didn't. He wanted to protect her, and that's what scared him. He wasn't supposed to gain any actual feelings of affection toward her. She was supposed to be dead. That's what he was being paid to do. So then, why does he keep meeting up with her? Why didn't he just do this one job and move on with his life? Why did he put it off and take other jobs, completing them without any problem? He needed to kill her, and he needed to do it now. After they went out again the next day, Murdoch invited her into his home, which was the perfect place to eliminate her without anyone noticing. As he led her to his living room, he grabbed a blanket and wrapped it around Wyan. The night had been rather chilly, so she thought it was nice. But in Murdoch's mind, it could also help with carrying the body away without getting bloodstains on the couch. They settled down and began to watch a movie. There was a knife nearby, if only he could reach it without her panicking. The job would be over before he knew it. His arm, as he reached for the hidden weapon, wrapped around her shoulder, and his face got close to hers. Both of them blushed heavily at the position they were in, but neither of them seemed to mind it. Slowly but surely, they leaned in and their lips met in a warm and sweet kiss. The knife and movie were quickly forgotten as they continued them only separating for quick breaths before coming back for more. This carried on for several minutes before they both finally pulled away, red-faced and panting. "Murdoch," Wyan murmured softly, looking into his chocolate-brown eyes as he stared back. Embarrassed, he buried his face in the crook of her neck, feeling her warm flesh meet his flushed cheek. Wyan's right hand ascended to his hair, massaging his head while her left embraced him in a hug. He began to pepper small, chaste butterfly kisses on her neck and lower jaw, which made her giggle. He was simply relishing in the glory and warmth that was Wyan's embrace without a care in the world. Her melodic voice reached his ears, and he smiled. "I love you, Murdoch." I love you too." That night, once again, his victim left his clutches unscathed. Murdoch groaned in anger. Why couldn't he do it? Why couldn't he let himself harm her? He was a cold-blooded killer with a heart and soul as black as the coffee he drank, so why couldn't he bring himself to go through with his job? As he lay down on his couch, the plush cushions still warm from where the two had been together, he realized the horrific truth. He was actually in love with his victim, Wyan Ellen, and there was nothing he could do about it. "You can see yourself in it." "So, hypothetically, if you wanted to hide a dead body, would you remove the feet of the victim after their hands, or would you not take them at all?" Murdoch looked over at his girlfriend in shock. This was not something he expected to hear from Wyan, of all people. "Why would you want to remove the feet?" "So, if you wanted to make sure that the body couldn't be identified by prints, you would want to cut the feet off too, right?" Murdoch laughed a bit and leaned forward. "Why would you need to know the answer to this hypothetical question?" "I've been really into mystery and detective shows and novels recently, and I was wondering if that was logical." He smiled at his lover. "Well, I don't think toe prints are used enough in crime labs, nor would anyone have active records of them to keep, so I'd say the answer is no. You could leave the feet, but if you're paranoid enough, sure, take them." It was these rare moments he could talk about something pertaining to his job without causing a panic. She still didn't know, nor would she ever if he could help it. Sometimes, however, he did wonder how she would be as a partner to his work. With her passion for crime knowledge, she could help in so many ways. But alas, he needed to keep his dirty work a secret. It was for the best. Murdoch just wanted to be with her, and his job prevented so many happy possibilities from happening. He thought once again about the best way to get rid of her, but his heart ached at the mere thought of her being gone. He could never hurt her. How could he hurt the one person who made him feel so alive? The thought of Wyan leaving him hurt just as much as the reality that he still had a job to do, and telling her would be a one-way ticket to heartbreak. Their 1-year anniversary was coming up, and Murdoch dreaded it. 1 year. No, over 1 year of putting off what was supposed to be an easy kill-and-run mission. His employer had reached out to him many times, asking why the job wasn't done yet. But how could Murdoch tell him that he was in love with and dating the person he was hired to kill? That night, as he lay in his bed after another date with Wyan, he silently cried, because he finally knew how to kill the love of his life. It's beautiful until it makes you bleed. Happy anniversary, darling. Murdoch invited her into his home, admiring the beautiful woman in front of him. Wyan smiled and gave him a warm and comforting hug. The clock on the wall was ticking, irritating the murderous male. It was another reminder of his limited time. Why was he doing this? He had made dinner for the two of them, cooking her favorite meal, which brought a smile to her face. Murdoch's heart panged painfully in his chest. How many times would he be able to see that happy face? Never mind. He didn't want to know. After dinner came relaxation, and he put some nice music on. The couple cuddled on the couch, relishing in the warmth that they both produced. Murdoch wanted to be happy, but he couldn't be. The clock ticked again, and every click made Murdoch feel sick. He couldn't do this, but he had to, or else she would eventually find out and leave. He couldn't deal with that pain. He didn't want to let her go, but he needed to. As he was untangling himself from his lover, a song came up over the radio, and Wyan smiled excitedly. "Dance with me! I love this song!" The song was a sappy tune about star-crossed lovers who wanted to be together, but one of them had to leave the other forever. How fitting, thought Murdoch as his hands landed on her hips and her arms wrapped around his neck. They gazed into each other's eyes as the music played, the pair lazily swaying side to side, completely lost in the moment. Murdoch knew that one day this very scene would be his own personal hell. He leaned forward, pressing his lips to her forehead, and then taking her hands as he knelt down on one knee. Wyan's look of surprise and happiness made Murdoch nervous as he pulled out a small leather box. Opening it up, he produced a beautiful ring, black metal with a small red ruby in the middle. With a dry throat and shaky knees, he spoke. "Wyan, I love you. There's no other way to say it. You've impacted my life in a way I could never repay. My life changed forever when you let me sit with you at that cafe. I don't want to imagine my life without you. So will you marry me?" She nodded happily and threw her arms around him, kissing him on the lips. Murdoch couldn't prevent tears from falling as he held his darling. The ring found its new home on Wyan's left ring finger, and the two shared their love together. The song was ended, and Murdoch's right hand flicked slightly behind her, producing a knife from inside his sleeve. With shaky hands and a heavy heart, he drove the blade deep into her back. A small gasp escaped her kiss-swollen lips, and she looked into his eyes, tears filling her own. "Murdoch?" she whispered as she fell into his arms, the light leaving her eyes forever. He had done it. Markiplier had finally completed his year-long task, but it cost him everything. He cursed himself, hugging the limp body of his lover and crying into her shoulder, wishing he could have taken it back. Why did he do this? He loved her, and he killed her. His hands were shaking as he took off the engagement ring and hung it around his neck, right next to his pendant. He sadly carried her body down to a special furnace in his basement where he cremated her body. Many hours and with many tears later, he took her ashes, placing them both in a fancy box, and a small portion was placed in a small vial, which joined the ring and charm on his necklace. The murderous man informed his employer that the deed was done, but refused to accept the pay. No amount of money could replace the treasure he had taken from the world. It looked so bleak and cold. He could hardly remember the last time he felt like this. The world had seemed so bright and wonderful when she was with him, and now his darling, his light, and his world were gone. He was alone, with no one to blame but himself. His heart, once joyful and light, was heavy and dark as his preferred coffee. Wyan's last look of betrayal and pain was burned into his memory, and as he sat on his couch, realizing that her lightly perfumed scent still lingered on the cushioned seat, he held his head in his hands and cried. Love is an imaginary dagger.